another edition of On Report for Super League TV, where today we're joined by a very special father and son partnership. We all know how Rugby League is famous for its family affair, and we're keeping it in the family today, but there are very few that we can think of, because we've been racking our brains already, of father and son that have been coaches. Now we've thought of a couple, haven't we, already? We've thought Paul and Gary Charlton, the Dunns as well, but the Bells. Very few though that have been coached. A lot of brothers, a lot of father and sons that have played, but not so much coaches, I suppose. Was it always a given, Richard, that you would go into coaching after your dad?
I'm not too sure. You know, get asked that question a lot, and I suppose my upbringing had a fair amount to do with the fact that I've probably got the game ingrained in me. You know, growing up in Featherstone on a street full of sort of people that went on to be rugby players, or a lot of people that would have played in my dad's era and things like that. We were brought up amongst it, and obviously followed my dad's career a lot as a young boy. Me and my brother used to go watch him every weekend, and my dad became a coach, you know, fairly young. You know, back then fairly young in his career and his life as well. So it's always been around us, and you know, I've always had such a love for the game. But I don't think that's ever a given that you're going to follow. You know, you're going to follow that same path. What
do you remember about your dad's coaching?
A lot of it, really. I've got a strong memory about rugby league, and I've sort of always had a capacity to keep information and, you know, statistical information and stuff like that. If you like, I remember his first job, which was inaugural at Carlisle when they first started up, and they travelled. They were based at Featherstone Sports Centre actually, and they travelled. We used to travel up on a weekend, watch them play, and then of course not long after that, Featherstone Rovers, and a famous cup victory, which they still keep rolling us out every time there's a Challenge Cup story to do now, which is, you know, some 30 years later. So I've got strong memories, and I've seen the good times. You know, I've been very fortunate to have been, you know, in and around sort of cup winning episodes and things like that, and I've also been at the other side where I've seen the difficult times that my dad's had when his team's not been winning, and, you know, and he's given up on a job. So I think from that point of view, away from the rugby side of things, you know, I can see the impact that it has on you personally, the impression it has on your life, and I suppose in a way that's readied me for some of the, you know, the good times and not so good times as well.
Well, as you said, we're here in Featherstone, and the famous association and that very special Challenge Cup win as well while you were at Featherstone. But did you ever, I mean, you must have been proud of Richard going into coaching. Did you have any warnings for him? What was your advice when he started to kind of go into the path of coaching?
Not really, because the game's so different now, and obviously Richard's a part of the full-time era. And it's a big step to take, to give up a good job, which he did. That was my only trepidation in it, and it was a worry at the time, but he's managed to come through it, although he's still relatively young. He's still got a few years ahead of him to hopefully remain in the coaching job.
How different do you see coaching? Is it looking on now? How different is it from when you were coaching? Are the pressures very different?
I think the pressures are more so because it's a full-time job now, and I did say when they made it full-time and made it the job, that it'd take a lot of fun out of the game, and I think it has. And finance has basically governed, I think, the teams who are going to get success and the ones who are going to struggle. As Richard's team, Wakefield Trinity, they've lost probably 9 good players, so he's going to have to struggle in this year without his probably 9 best players, because they're not going to buy the 9 worst players. So it's hard, and obviously you think for him, well, as a father, you think for him.
Were finances always something that you were conscious of though as a coach back in your day, or was it you kind of kept that separate to the club board and executives? You just kind of kept coaching with players on the field rather than...
Well, in my day, Natalie, it was a committee. People were elected by the members to become a committee man. So it was only the generosity of some of the people on the board who donated, you know, their own funds to keep the clubs going. So that financial difficulties played a big part in the career, in my career with certain clubs.
Is it different now, Rich? I mean, do you? There's
fun.
so many aspects, aren't there?
I still like to have fun. I think that's been something that has formed part of my own coaching philosophy, really, in that we all started playing the game because we loved it and we were young kids, and I think it's vitally important that while it is so serious and it is a business and we're under so much scrutiny now, you know, everything we say, everything we do, and you know, the growth of media and social media and Sky TV and everything, we are under scrutiny, but I think it's always quite important to try and remember why we were all involved in the game in the first place, and try and keep that element of fun in it. And for me, I could understand my dad's trepidation, and when I was looking at going full time, because you know, I've got a young son and a good job, but I looked around and felt, you know, it's got to be someone, you know, someone's got to fill these spots. And I suppose I'd spent a lifetime, if you like, even though we were relatively young when I became full time, I'd spent a lifetime working towards this, both directly and indirectly. So yeah, there's been some changes. There's been huge changes in the way that the game's gone, with it being full time, winter to summer, the advent of, I suppose, or evolution rather than advent. The evolution of a head coach's role is, you know, the demands on his time, and I suppose the skill set now is probably, without being disrespectful, is probably far wider ranging than what it was, you know, 20, 30 years ago. So kind of talk us through a typical week. How much time is spent actually coaching a team on the field, you know, in the gym? How much is spent in an office? How much is spent with you know, directors and things like that? How much does that take you away from the game? That's a good question in itself, because I suppose you get to become a head coach because somewhere along the line someone thinks you can coach and players think you can coach. But when you become a head coach, I suppose your coaching time and the amount of time you can physically put into coaching the team, what you would have done as assistant, shrinks, because you've got stakeholders, you've got boards, you've got salary cap meetings. Recruitment these days is literally a 12-month ongoing process. You know, agents are obviously far more prevalent in the game. Management aspects take a lot more time. So, you know, for me, I can give you a sample week. Our players will get in around 8 o'clock on a morning. By 9 o'clock we get going. But between 8 and 9, you know, these guys are being tested, and, you know, tested for wellness, hydration, check how much they've slept. They'll get massage, they'll get physio in this time. Usually start a gym session. The gym sessions are probably at this stage of the year 45 minutes, an hour and 15 long. We'll do some video most days, anywhere between 20 minutes to 40 minutes, and then we'll spend probably an hour on the field, an hour 15. I mean, as coaches now, we'd like to have them longer on the field, but you know, one of the big changes in the game is the performance and scientific aspect, where now everybody's got a GPS set, and the sports scientists are telling us, you know, you can run in training for so long because of the amount of load that they've got on the players. So I suppose the planning of your week is very important. You know, we'll spend a lot of time planning, putting the week together. Analysis has changed in that I can remember, and you know, this was an early formation for me. You know, I'd watch my dad on a Sunday night, bring the video on, he'd have the old video to video going, the written statistics, whereas modern day technology, pretty much at the click of a button on the nights of the games, we've got access to all the games and pretty much all the statistics. So from a coaching point of view, a coaching tool, that's improved our knowledge, and it's certainly improved what we can give back to the players in terms of feedback, but also it takes an incredible amount of our time. You know, they would have relied a lot on what they saw and memory. Well, we've got instant feedback on everything. We've got every start and every player at the touch of a button, and I suppose you've got to find the balance between and temptation, really, to overload your players and try and pick out what you think are the most important parts of this week. But you know, video work alone can, you know, take you 15-20 hours a week.
I suppose if someone is advertising them for a coach's role, there are so many different aspects that, or so many different qualities that you've got to have. You're a businessman, you're a coach, you know, you're looking at nutrition, you're looking at so many different things, aren't you now, compared to...
For sure, and you know, you can buy expertise in, but you've also got to have enough background knowledge and base knowledge to make the right decisions when you're recruiting your staff on, you know, on matters like conditioning and nutritionists and certainly sports science. And you know, we use them as part to educate us as well. And some of the man management roles, the salary cap issues in terms of financial budgeting, I don't think there's too much that can pay for that. I think it's a case of, if you're assistant and you've got a good head coach, he will involve and include you. And if you've got a chief executive and an owner that you can work tightly and closely with, that makes for a more successful partnership, if you like, especially if you've got the same sort of plans moving forward. But I don't think there's anything that can really ready you for that step to be assistant to head coach, because no matter how you think you're in it as an assistant coach, you know, when you're in the hot seat, everything absolutely changes.
And the buck stops with you, doesn't
Absolutely,
it? If you're not getting the results on the field that the fans want, and the people above you want, and then it's
sure.
you, doesn't it?
But there's a lot that can affect that. You know, as my dad's already talked about, you know, I've been in a club that's in financial trouble, so, you know, far from being able to build on what we've already got, we're ripping it up, starting again with limited budgets. But you know, you deal with the cards that you dealt, and you play, you know, you play your best hand, and you do your best in the circumstances. And I suppose the buck stops with you, but there is a lot of factors that sort of are out of your control. So I think it's managing up and managing down is very, very important, and your relationships with I suppose key stakeholders in your club are also, I think, paramount to success.
Alan, what do you think makes a good coach now and maybe back then, and has that changed, or are they
good players? They make a good coach. Coaching qualifications basically, obviously knowing the game, a good tactical knowledge and man management. The players can make or break your career for you. You know, you could have done all the planning, but once they go over that touchline, the ball's in their hands. And I've seen some good coaches lose their jobs because of players not following their instructions.
Were there any coaches that you would admire, obviously, when you were playing, and who did you enjoy working with?
Well, you learn something off every coach you play with. Sometimes you learn how to do it, sometimes you learn how not to do it because you don't agree with what they're doing. Obviously, I played under Roger Millward as coach, and Roger was a great guy, you know, and we had a good side, so his job was made easier because of the quality of side we had. And then, as Richard said, my coaching career started at Carlisle. They were wanting to make an impact, so they allowed me to buy a good side, and we did get promotion in the first year, so I played with some good guys then, you know, and one of the funniest guys I ever played with, Mick Morgan. We both were in for the job, and he got the assistant's job. And I'm the more serious type, and Mick was a jokey type, so we were a match and, you know, worked well together. You pick up something off every coach you've played under. Whether you're using that is up to you.
I was going to say, you mentioned the serious side of what you kind of portrayed. How would you describe how you were as a coach? What words would people say of you?
Do you want me to describe?
No, I'll tell her. My nickname.
I'll let you and then you. See if it's different.
My nickname at Leeds. I worked at Leeds with Malcolm Reilly as his right-hand man, and the A-team lads there, the guys in the second team. I could see so much talent going to waste because of their attitude, and my nickname with them was Funeral Face, because every time I went to talk to them, I always gave them a rollicking. So I know exactly what people want to say about me.
What words would you describe Richard then as a coach? How would you?
You're not asking
well,
that.
I've said it before. I've said it before. He's an anorak. He's an anorak on Rugby League knowledge, and if you want to, he'd have got them questions what we were talking about earlier. I can't really say because I've never worked under him. Yeah. So unless you work with somebody, you don't know.
I think people have an assumption that because of my dad and he's sort of trod the same path, that we're constantly knocking each other up for advice and that, but that's never really been the case. You know, he's always allowed me to make my own decisions. When I feel like I've wanted some advice, I will approach him, and probably because I've not always taken that advice as well. I've always sort of been my own man, but he's always been there for me to get that advice, but has played a massive part in the formation, I suppose, of my involvement in the game by me watching and listening and observing. And yeah, some stories I tell journalists when they ask me now is, you know, in the old days, no one had mobile phones, so you know, we're constantly on his mobile phone, speaking to agents, speaking to players, but my dad would have to come home from training and everybody's phone used to be in the hallway, so when I was supposed to be in bed asleep, I'd be hanging over the banisters, sort of eavesdropping on his conversations, trying to work out which players he were trying to sign and which players he were trying to get rid of. So, you know, in an indirect way, you know, a lot of that time watching videos on a Sunday night, doing stats for him, I suppose gave me an early look and an early feel for what it were all about. And you know, like I say, well, I've never been one too much to pick the phone up and call around and ask for advice. You know, I've been my own man, and I'll make my own mistakes and live and die by them. He has played you know, obviously a strong part in the way I've been brought up and how I've arrived where I am.
And I suppose, Alan, you were saying earlier, you don't want to interfere.
No,
and
you've got to be your own man, you know. You get somebody who he can work with, and obviously Richard's got his staff who he's working under, and I'm sure he listens to them. They're the people that's involved with him at this moment in time. He needs them to be able to rely on them for things that he don't pick up, because you don't see everything, you don't hear everything what's said, you know, and you need a good right-hand man to help you through it.
We said earlier that there are so many highs and lows to coaching. I'm assuming that famous Challenge Cup win was your highlight as a coach, but maybe there were others.
Yeah, it's got to be, you know. Your dreams to play at Wembley, and I managed that 3 years prior in 1980 with the Kingston Rovers, and then I never thought that 3 years later I'd be walking out in front of Featherstone Rovers at Wembley. And so yeah, I suppose in coaching, it's the nicest thing that's happened to me.
I was gutted when he took the job, I can remember, because we'd spent all this time growing up watching OKR, and OKR at the time, for 5 or 6 years, when my dad were playing for him, were winning championships, playing at Wembley, floodlit finals and all this. And while Featherstone were his local team, we'd always supported my dad's team, so we thought, without upsetting too many locals in here, and it's early, we thought it were a bit of a come down to come and coach Featherstone. But yeah, it was a great time, and it coincided with, you know, some special moments in his private life, in his family life as well, and you know, I can remember it with a lot of clarity, and still, you know, really proud of, you know, that time in our lives.
I say something that will always be forever with you, and you look back on and be very proud of as a family.
Well, someone told me that we're the only father and son to coach at Wembley. If you're struggling to name coaches, the father and son, that might be. So, you know, I'm unbelievably proud of that fact. Even though, you know, we didn't get the chocolates on the day, and my dad's team did.
We did.
And they did. You know, I think that's something that I suppose will forever have his own little piece of history on that.
You weren't allowed in the winning team's dressing room that day, Richard, at Wembley.
Yeah, and you know, very lucky as a young boy to experience all that, to be in a Wembley changing room on the back of a final, and I'd say that the good times, and I've seen the bad times as well. You know, yeah. I've seen the tough times where your team's not winning, and you know, your work comes home with you, and I suppose I've gained just as much from those experiences, and it readies you. You know, it really readies you that, you know, not every season you're gonna win a Challenge Cup. You know, it might happen once in a lifetime if you're lucky, and I suppose that the bad times in coaching, or the lonely times, or the hard times, probably far outweigh the good times, and the elation of winning certainly doesn't last as long and carry with you as long as I suppose the deflation and disappointment of losing again.
Moving on to present day then, and very recently with France.
Yes.
How different was that experience for you?
Very different, very different. It was great. You know, I'm really proud to get that job. I'd interviewed for the England job when Steve Mack got it, and I felt at the time, I didn't want it. I said I didn't want it in the interview. I didn't think I was ready, and I'd nowhere near got any, sort of got the runs on the board. But I went along for an interview for the experience. But when the France job came along, I thought it'd be a great opportunity, particularly with the World Cup as well. And working with the French, were terrific. Made some, I suppose, lasting friendships and partnerships. The president were a great guy, Jerome Guisset, was my assistant coach. The playing staff, I couldn't have asked for any more from them. We had a great tournament. The results, obviously, we're in a tough group. We're in a really, really tough group. The players gave everything they've got. We would have liked to have played a bit better in one or two other games. But it was a campaign what I really enjoyed, and to be on that stage as part of what was a successful tournament on and off the field were a real privilege and a fantastic experience. And the culture side of things, of basically being French for 2 or 3 months, I had a crack at learning the language. I lived out there for 2 or 3 months and really experienced the side of things away from rugby as well.
Is that something you're going to continue? Is that something yet to be decided?
Yeah, yet to be decided. I did it on a handshake agreement, and I'm still in contact with I suppose with the important people that make the decisions out there. But I'm yet to see the programme moving forward, what the commitment will be, and what direction they want to go in. And who knows? But I'm pretty comfortable if they say. Yeah, you want to do it again, I'll speak to Wakefield like I did last time, and if they don't, then that's fine. I'll shake hands and wish them all the best.
And Alan, we look at the grandchildren, the next generation. Are we going to see more Agar coaches in the world of rugby league, do you think? Is it too early to say?
I think it's a bit too early to say. Richard's son James, he's into squash. Jonathan's son, he's got all his rugby kit, but I think his daughter might make a good rugby league player.
Yeah, unlikely at this stage. I'd say it's probably unlikely at this stage, but you never know. You never know. Me and my brother were both heavily into it. Both played and both have coached at various levels. But so far the signs are the grandkids, which isn't a bad thing. Which is not a bad thing, I'd say.
It's been lovely chatting to both of you. Thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you, of course, all the very best this season.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching another edition of On Report.